Thank you, Madam Chair. As the representative of the third largest Caribbean diaspora in the United States, this hearing really resonates deeply with the immigrant communities in my district, the Massachusetts 7th. Many of my constituents, many of my neighbors send remittances to their families in Haiti and throughout the Caribbean, which have really proven a lifeline amidst the financial hardships of the pandemic and, of course, global inflation as well. Remittances help working class families stay afloat when they need it the most and have demonstratively reduced poverty in several countries. Mr. Mello, according to the Atlantic Council report, which you co-authored, the Caribbean has seen a decline in correspondent banking relationships since 2015, with the World Bank citing the region as the most severely affected by this phenomenon from a global perspective. As a result, remittances that my constituents send to their families have become more expensive if they are not denied or delayed entirely. Can you please expand upon how the decline in correspondent banking relationships is harming working class families in the region? I just wanted to build upon that question from my colleague, Congressman Meeks, earlier.
Thank you for the question. Mostly, as I mentioned to Congressman Meeks, it supplements working class population's incomes. It's what people use, especially when there's job loss and poverty. I mean, we saw this with the pandemic, where 10 CARICOM countries are tourism-dependent economies. During the pandemic, tourism shut down, which meant that they weren't unable to go to work. Where were they able to get income to supplement that, to buy food, to purchase, to access healthcare, access education? It came from remittances. We see this in Haiti, we saw this in Jamaica. Now, pandemic was just 2-3 years still ongoing, but when we think about disasters, extreme weather events, remittances help. They help with taxes. They help across the board. At the same time, remittances, and when it's delayed, when it is much more costly, it affects the people that are in the U.S. itself. They are then going to be unable to send remittances, and they themselves, especially in Massachusetts and New York and Florida, who are already sort of living in sort of underserved communities, are going to have to pay more and more each time.
Thank you. And so, again, just building upon a little bit more. So for countries like Haiti and Jamaica, we know that remittances accounted for 20% of their GDP in 2020 alone. So if the decline in correspondent banking relationships continues, what will be the impact on these nations' economies?
Well, for countries like Jamaica, it's 20% of their GDP, but then you have sort of tourism that's about 25% of their GDP. So about almost half their GDP is being wiped out during a pandemic and when there's limited remittances. What happens is that when you have limited economic stability, it can create political instability. When people don't have jobs, when people are impoverished, they have to find other ways of making money. It can lead to sort of petty crime. Women and children are disproportionately affected. They can become victims of human trafficking. So it creates broad political instability. When you couple that with other factors such as climate change, such as energy insecurity, high food prices, it creates a very worrisome picture in the Caribbean, especially over the long term.
Yeah, worrisome, devastating. And so for a region disproportionately vulnerable to climate disasters and dependent on the tourism industry, finding a solution to this de-risking problem is really critical. Mr. Mella, in the report you co-authored, you list a number of possible solutions to this problem. Specifically, you discuss categorizing correspondent banking as critical market infrastructure due to the important role these relationships play in Caribbean economies. Can you elaborate how this categorization would increase access to financial services in the region?
Yes, so both in the US and globally, it would help identify correspondent banking as a global public good, as a human right, basically, as Prime Minister Motley stated in the previous panel. Doing this will give added justification for international financial institutions to incorporate correspondent banking as critical market infrastructure in development packages, in development finance, in USAID assistance after extreme weather events. It helps also to sort of underscore the vulnerabilities that these countries are facing, even as high and middle income countries, allowing them another justification to be able to access concessional financing and blended finance as well.
Thank you, and thank you to our distinguished chair for this historic hearing. This is certainly an issue of critical economic, racial, and immigrant justice, and we can't sit idly by.